Hi, everybody. I am back. Whoops, got to annotate here. Okay. So, as I showed you before, here we are. This is what we've got going on here. Actually, I can move him down here. He doesn't have to stay. So, we started talking about Sierpinski Triangle, but what I want to do is I'm going to show you again how we build this, but then I want to take one of these rows at a time because I think each one kind of deserves its platform with which to play with. So the first one we're going to start off with is the length of the sides of the triangles as they change as you keep building. So let's head on over here. Okay, so in stage one, I'm just going to say the length of one of the new unshaded triangles. So if I'm going to call this guy stage one, okay, here's stage one. I'm not doing anything to it. So right now, the length of one of those sides we're going to say is the length of one. So therefore, the length of this entire thing is 1. So as we move along, I know I'm working with 1 here, okay? But then I'm going to go to stage 2. And this is going to be stage 2 down here, okay? And in stage 2, like you saw before, what happens is how do we get this to work? So what we're going to do is we're going to go back, but we're going to find the midpoints of all 3 sides of this big equilateral triangle. So I'm technically going to find the midpoint of this guy, the midpoint of that guy, and the midpoint of that guy, and then connect them. So that's literally what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and plot where I believe the midpoints are going to be. It's a little further down there. This guy's right about here. This guy's right about here. And if I had a ruler, I would go ahead and use one. I'm going to strongly recommend that you have your kids do that and then just shade this area in, because it's going to take less time for them to shade this in instead of the other 3 as you saw in the previous page. We're kind of going opposite, okay? So we're going to shade this guy first and leave these guys open. So it's going to look like the opposite of what you're seeing here as we move along, but that's kind of cool. So let's go to stage 2. And in stage 2, again, the length of this whole side is 1. So now I'm asking for the length of the side of the new unshaded triangle, or one of the new unshaded triangles. So right now there's 3 unshaded, but this one right here, the length of this side is going to be, if we're cutting it in half, your kids are probably going to be able to come up with a half. So in stage 2, the length of your sides is now a half. Now when you go to stage 3, again, we're going to start off with what we had in stage 2. Okay, this is what we started off with in stage 2. Connect the dots, la 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 la. All right, but now we're headed into stage 3, so we're going to call this stage 3. So now what we're going to do is we are going to change the color. I'm going to go with green because green's pretty. And this time we have 3 unshaded triangles. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the midpoints of those 3 sides for all 3 of them and then connect them as well. As I said earlier, it's going to be really smart to go ahead and let the kids really figure out what's going on here on the first day of this by just letting them go ahead and learn that they are just creating something like this along here. So if I know again that this is a 1, then I'm looking at my new triangle here. This is my new unshaded triangle. This was my unshaded triangle over here. Now it's over here. So now if you look at 1, your kids, you want them to recognize that you now are taking 1 and you're breaking it into 4 equal pieces. So therefore, each one of them is going to represent 1/4. Okay, so over here, it's going to be 1/4. Now, when you go into stage 5, as we said earlier, we keep going back to, I'm going to go back to my pink one because that's what I started off with, and we're going into stage 4 now. Here's your stage 4. Okay, so in stage 4, I have this right here. That's from stage 2. And now I have to do the same iteration, right, that I did in stage 3, because these are called iterations. Iterations is you're doing the same thing every time, but every time your triangles keep getting smaller and smaller. And as time goes on, we can find out what fraction that represents. So here we are. We have this one over here, and that's stage 3. So now we're going to go into stage 4, right? Stage 4, so again, we're looking at all the open spaces or the unshaded triangles. And again, we're going to find those midpoints of those sides and play connect the dots and move along from there. So it's kind of cool because it's got this really neat artistic feel to it. So we're doing this beautiful artistic feel to how we're building this beautiful Sierpinski triangle. It's so beautiful. It's so pretty. And the nice thing is this has a nice little artsy feel to it, and it's so mathematical at the same time. And I think that's what's beautiful about it, because number patterns are going to be coming to life, big time life in this process, which is so exciting. So here we are in stage 4, which I'll write up top here because I know my face is cutting it off because I'm down at the bottom here. Okay, so now again, the length of this side is still 1. But you can ask your kids, well, how many pieces is that side broken down into? And again, hopefully they're going to count it up for you, and they're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. So that means each segment represents 1/8. So you can go ahead and just be like 1/8, and because that's 1 there. So if you ask them, 1/8 plus 1/8, if I do that 8 times, it's going to bring me back to 1, which is going to be mind blowing because I know that the kids have interesting things. They're like, what's going on here? So you can either have them predict this one, or you could actually have them go ahead and do stage 5 and, go ahead and do you can have them do stage 5. A lot of the kids are going to want to, because once they understand what the pattern is, they're going to realize, can I keep going? And you're like, yeah, you can totally keep going. And you're just going to keep going and going and going as you're doing this. So I'm putting stage 5 in here because I can, because it's kind of cool. Okay. So as I'm putting stage 5 in here, right, we're doing stage 5, as we move along here, doing our things here. I'm going to stop, but we have the idea that now if we go to stage 5, it's going to get super small, but your kids, I'm sure, going to be excited to count that there are 16 of them. So then that turns out to be, in stage 5, we have 1/16. So now you can change this to a 6. You can extend this out as far as you want, which might be a wise thing to do, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Like if you said to them, if we were to keep going and going, can you predict what the next ones of these would be, and give them some time to work on that. But what they're hopefully recognizing is that if you're doing 2, 4, 6, 8, I'm sorry, 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 8, 16, they should be recognizing that they're multiplying the denominator every time by 2. They're going to be like, oh, the denominator keeps, is doubling. So there's a chance they're going to predict that it's 1/32, that this is going to be 1/64, because you're multiplying the denominator by 2 every time. And this is where you get to come in and say, well, if you're multiplying the denominator by 2, what am I multiplying the numerator by? And they're going to go, it's 1 every time, so it's 1 times 1. So technically, they can go ahead and tell you that every time you're doing this, you're multiplying by 1/2, by 1/2, by 1/2. And what's cool to me is that this number pattern came from basically doing iterations of Sierpinski Triangle and just looking at the length of the sides and saying that they just keep getting cut in half, because the reason why they're getting cut in half is because you keep finding the midpoints. So midpoint cuts something in half. So now you've got a really cool geometric concept of midpoints, of something in the middle, and the middle cuts things into 2 equal pieces. And the reason why that keeps happening is because you keep cutting the length of a side in half. Every time you do it, the length of a side keeps cutting in half. Now, what's also cool is the kids are going to start to recognize, well, I can go on forever and ever, right? So I can do infinite. You can actually bring up infinity, infinitely many triangles. And you can talk about, though, but the triangles keep getting smaller and smaller. So you can really get into a conversation, which we will next, about area and what's happening with the areas, because I think that's totally worth something that we can totally do with this. But again, I kind of like the idea of actually breaking that sheet down over here to have them fill this thing out from the very beginning for each one. It might be a little overwhelming, but then again, you might be able to do that with them if you give them time with which to do it. And I think that's what it's going to be. It's going to have to be give them some time. All right, let's pause.